Exactly. Okay. Next group.
Yeah, so we kind of said in general, but we said we want to convince them that one of our problems are real problems.
That is the kind of line of thinking that's going to get you to the exact best solution. Is practically a story. Some of the stuff that matters about it, we can explain in 30 seconds.
Everyday technology.
Welcome to How to Pitch, or whatever they decided to call this talk. So I'm Kasper, I'm the co-founder of Carpe. It's an antiperspirant for sweaty hands and feet. And we just basically finished closing a $2 million round of fundraising this month. We don't have the money yet, so don't clap, it's bad luck. We should have the money in 2 weeks. But it's been a 6-month round of fundraising, and the reason we were able to do this, we were able to close the round, is just a lot of pitching to investors. So the Blueprint team decided to invite me here to talk about how to pitch. And I said, okay, great, so how many days is this workshop? And they said 40 minutes, which sucks because pitching is an extremely in-depth topic. It's really broad, it's really deep, and there's just so much you can learn about it because there's hours of TED Talks, there's like libraries full of books about pitching, and all of that stuff is actually really useful. Like if you guys want to get good at pitching, talk to me and I'll tell you 20 books to read. But today, in 40 minutes, I'm trying to think what I can do to help you guys as much as possible prepare for the pitches you'll be doing at about 1.5 hours to 2 hours. And I think I have some good tips. And the good news is really that all of you guys actually pitch a lot. And you're going to keep getting better at pitching till the day you die because we all pitch every day. Every time it's a Wednesday night and we want to go to Shooters and our friends are tired and one of them has a midterm in the morning, but we really want to go to Shooters and we're like, come on, let's pregame, let's go to Shoots. That's a pitch. And anytime you're out of food points, yeah, we call it Shoots. Anytime you're out of food points and you know, you need to call your parents and have them send you more money, that's a pitch. And anytime you're filling out an application, anytime you're writing a cover letter, anytime you're updating your Tinder profile, that's a form of pitch. Because a pitch is really any time that you're trying to convince someone of something. And that seems like really, really basic, but I guarantee you that is the #1 mistake people make when they're pitching, especially entrepreneurs starting companies or people in your position trying to present projects, is you get so caught up in the project or the presentation or whatever that you really forget to take a step back and realize why you're there, what you're really trying to accomplish with this pitch. So I'm going to give you 3 pieces of advice today that I wish I would have had when I was getting started with Carpe 3 years ago that I think would have helped me persuade a lot of people much quicker to help my co-founder David and me out with it. And the first one, which I think is the golden rule, is that one. Is that the better you understand who you're trying to convince and what you're trying to convince them of, the better your pitch is going to be. So that is #1. The worst pitches I've ever done have been pitch competitions for startups where it's just like, you know, it's literally called a pitch competition. You're supposed to pitch your startup and you don't know what criteria you're being judged on and they're like, this is the best company. Because that's terrible, because I really don't know who I'm talking to. I really don't know anything about the judges, and I don't know what I'm supposed to convince them of, whether this is profitability, whether it's like this is a company that is actually going to have a social impact, whether this is an idea that could be good. I think in your case, it's a little simpler because you guys have a scope of project, right? And you're not actually supposed to make projects that you're going to go out and do in the next 2 months, but something that can be done, right? So I want to get first a better understanding from everybody here of who your somebody and and what your something is going to be. So do you know who's judging you today?
Speakers.
The what?
The speakers.
The speakers? I assume so. Yeah, the speakers from last night. I think that's probably who it's going to be. But it's those people who are really in this industry. You know, that's the perspective you have to realize you're catering to. And the second thing is, what are you going to be trying to convince them of? Somebody tell me.
Viability.
What's that?
Viability.
Viability, is that it? Like, but really, like, why are you here? Yeah?
Solving a problem.
Okay.
One of the questions they broke up yesterday.
Mm-hmm. So you're trying to convince them that of all the teams here, you have the best problem you're solving, or
The best solution to their problems.
to their problems? So they presented you with the problems, and you guys are coming up with the solutions.
Well, it's also about incorporating nature and technology.
Okay. So see, this seems a little complicated. So I think we really need to get our hands on this because it's going to be tough to convince these judges of whatever you want to convince them if we don't quite know what we want to convince them of. So are you guys all with your teams? Okay. Take 3 minutes to try to explain in 10 seconds or like take 2 minutes to talk with your team, figure out exactly what you're trying to convince these judges of, and then I'll call on each team to tell me in 10 seconds what you're trying to convince the judges of. Go.
Exactly. Simple today.
All right, that's time. Everybody, this group, what are you going to be convincing the judges of?
That there's a problem with human-wildlife train collisions, and we believe that real-time monitoring can help stop.
Okay, so if they believe that, you'll be happy, like even if they think you're the worst team here?
If they believe that, then they'll want to support that.
Well, what if they think the other groups have a more important?
And this is the most pressing issue as well.
So that's what you want to convince them of, that this is an issue and it's the most pressing issue in
And
wildlife.
it's the most cost effective and feasible.
It can feasibly solve using inexpensive technology.
Okay, so basically there's like these 4 points that you're trying to hit, and you want to convince the judges that you guys address it better than anybody else here, right? Perfect. Next team.
To solve the disconnect people have with nature in an effort to increase people's involvement with conservation and collect data that will help with conservation.
Okay, we'll go back to that one later in terms of simplifying. But I like that. Next group.
There's a need for an online platform to not only inform, but to motivate users to make more eco-friendly online purchases in order to reduce global CO2 emissions caused by inefficient shipping methods.
Perfect. Next.
We have the best system to stop boat accidents with manatees on the Florida coast.
That sounds cool. I want to hear that one. Next.
We have developed a new form of lionfish net that's going to be able to viably catch large amounts of lionfish, and we believe that we can create that to sustain an economic industry and have the social media capabilities to sustain that industry with public demand.
I like that. Next group.
All right, yeah, so we kind of said in general, we said we want to convince them that one, our problem is a real problem that needs to be addressed. Second, our solution is viable, innovative, and addresses it directly. And then third, we understand the steps to be successful in tackling the problem. And fourth, we are the team to do it.
Excellent. And 2 more teams here or 1 more team? 2, okay. So that team. What was yes.
Yeah. So our plan is to create a new system in which we eliminate microplastics that are contaminating the global ecosystem by creating a chain cycle where we will be able to capture and reuse it as new fabrics and materials for clothing, blankets, and other merchandise.
Okay. And then 2 more teams still are. All right. Just you guys.
So our app can effectively predict natural disasters using crowdsourced data about abnormal pet behaviors.
Okay. So I heard a lot of great pitches for your ideas, and each of those has something I do kind of want to tweak about it, but we're going to get into that in the next step. I think what I was going for in this step is exactly what you guys said. Again, the reason I'm saying it's the single most important thing to understand who you're pitching to and what you're trying to convince them of, because for the past 18 hours, you guys have been so focused on your ideas that you might be forgetting exactly what this pitch is for, right? This pitch is just a small part of the entire thing. You've made an amazing idea, you've made an amazing project, and this is kind of not even really completely about that. This is about convincing the judges what they need to be convinced of, and I think that is the kind of line of thinking that's going to get you to the exact best solution. So with Carpe, I spend 99% of my time with the company doing all sorts of business stuff that nobody's ever going to see, right? And thinking about all sorts of decisions that nobody's going to care about. But the 1% I need to tell to the judges is practically a story that, you know, I rarely think about during my day-to-day, but it's, or not the judges, but investors, but it's what I need to convince them of because, you know, in my case, I want investors' money. So what I'm saying is I'm going to VCs and I want to convince them that if they give me their money, you know, they're either going to make it back or they're going to have a great time losing it with me. So that is the first step in making a great pitch. So don't forget that as the day goes on. Remember who you're talking to. Remember what you want to convince them of. Not just tell them what you're working on, remember what you want to convince them of. The second part, and this is something I think you guys already have a great understanding of based on your 10-second pitches, is that pitching follows a power law. or some people call it an 80-20 rule, where basically 80% of the value of your pitch, 80% of what matters, comes in 20% of the time. So to give you an example, I give an hour-long pitch to VCs when I'm meeting with them in like their boardrooms. That goes into all sorts of details of the business. And then I have to present it, Melissa and Doug last fall, and Howie, who's this great guy at Duke I&E, was saying you need to have a 5-minute pitch. And I freaked out because I said I need an hour to pitch. And I somehow crammed it down to 5 minutes. And I realized that 5-minute pitch contained basically 95% of all the important things that were in the hour-long pitch. And to take that to an extreme, we have a 30-second national TV commercial that contains about 80% of what matters in that hour-long pitch. To which, what I mean is, like, we have a full company with a lot of employees, and everything, like 80% of the stuff that matters about it, we can explain in 30 seconds. And not just what matters about, like, we can explain our idea in 30 seconds, we can explain why you should invest in Carpe in 30 seconds, or in the case of our TV commercial, we can explain why you should buy Carpe in 30 seconds. Now that doesn't go for everybody, that's just, we can explain it to the people who we care about. We can explain to VCs in 30 seconds why they should invest in Carpe, and in those 30 seconds we're going to use a lot of complex terms that only VCs really care about, and then when we explain in 30 seconds to people why they should buy Carpe, we're specifically talking to the people who can empathize with having sweaty hands and sweaty feet every day, which is what Carpe solves. So I think the next exercise I was thinking for you guys is basically, again, go down to the 10 seconds, and in 10 seconds, think about what you're trying to convince these judges of, distill it to 10 seconds. And I know you're trying to convince them of, from what I've heard of these groups, from like the judging rubric, it's 4 different things. Think about how, if you guys had to get up on that stage or into that science fair you're going to be doing at 4 p.m. and every team only had 10 seconds, how you would use your 10 seconds to score as many points in that rubric as possible. So I'll give you guys 2 minutes and then I'll hear from the teams again what your 10 seconds are. Go. Okay, that's time, everybody. This group has a 2-second pitch. So, let's start with this one. Guys, what's your 2-second pitch? Okay, next group, what's your 2-second pitch?
Cow methane is the biggest emitter of greenhouse gases. By building a modular algae farm, we can be the suppliers for new feed that would decrease emissions by 90%.
I like that. Okay. What could you cut out of there?
We don't have to say we can be the suppliers for new feed. We can just say we can decrease emissions by 90%.
Okay, but so what you're doing is basically cow farts are the main cause of global warming, and you guys make food for cows that stops methane emission, right? I would say make it that simple, and then so I think that's your core. Then, feasibility is a little bit more difficult always. I think of all your points, feasibility is probably going to be the hardest one to convince people of because that's where you're going to get into the tech. Then it's maybe what you might need another extra 5 seconds. And so this is the way I think you guys should be thinking about your pitches for the next hour and a half, is spend most of your time getting your first 10 seconds right, and then spend a few more minutes getting your next 30 seconds down. And by the time you've got judges talking to you for 40 seconds, you've won them over. So after that, I don't think you really need to prepare the remaining 3 minutes of your pitch, because at that point, they'll want to know the details if they're already listening. You've got those first 10 seconds really, maybe another 30 seconds, and that's the power law. Next group, what's your 10-second pitch?
We have a built-in current untapped market where we can eliminate 80% of microplastics that are in the ocean, while also creating fabrics and materials for consumer use. Okay,
so what in there is necessary beyond saying, we made a thing where we can take plastic from the ocean and turn it into clothes? Is that a simpler way of saying, like, basically what you said, or am I missing something? That's basically, so that's the kind of thinking I want everybody to do, is like, you guys have been working on these incredibly complicated, difficult projects for 18 hours, and I've seen your whiteboards, like it's really impressive in those rooms. And it's really difficult to get out of that mind space and remember for a second that, it doesn't need to be that complicated. We can really dumb it down. Like with Carpe, it's kind of difficult for me to go to pitches and basically say, we need something that stops sweaty hands and feet, because it seems to trivialize all the work we've done for the past 3 years, but that is 90% of what my company is, right? And so the simpler and the stupider you can say it, the more people are gonna listen and be like, well, that's a cool idea. I know we have all this plastic in the ocean, I wanna wear it as clothes. That seems like an excellent idea, tell me how you're gonna do it. And then they keep listening. 2-second team, are you guys ready? Okay, on to the next one.
Okay. We've developed a new type of lionfish trap to remove invasive species. This is going to help create an economic market to help local fishermen, eventually lead to a global aspect, and we believe we have the societal power to do so.
Okay, it's pretty simple. I really like it. The one thing that I wouldn't immediately understand is why are lionfish bad? You know, you mentioned the invasive species, but I would just start it with like something that might be a hyperbole almost. Like, look, lionfish are taking over the oceans, they're awful. We made a trap that basically allows local fishermen to get the fish, sell them, remove the ocean problem, and make money. Right? So think about how to make it even simple, but I think you got it really simple. That's really good. And there is a team behind you guys, right?
Yeah, great.
Yeah. We use solar-powered sonar sensor grid to decrease boat collision with manatees, effectively reducing animal and material injury.
Okay. That's good. But again, I think like that addendum you added, you don't even need that for the simplest version, right? You basically need to say like, boats are running into manatees, this sucks. We made a great system that can basically prevent this. And then jump into a little more how it works. I think the solar part is interesting, so I want to talk to you guys later about how it actually does, and maybe you can even weave that into the 5 seconds of how you do it differently than anybody else. Over here.
Consumers currently don't understand or are feel indifferent towards how products are shipped to them, and we've created a solution to empower them and help them understand that process.
Okay. That's good, it's simple, but why does it matter?
So the shipping processes are inefficient, and our solution is making that more efficient and displaying the information.
So you've created a platform to make customers aware of the waste in shipping, so they themselves want to get rid of it. Right? So yeah, perfect, I like that. And just keep thinking about how you can say it even simpler. I'm sure there's a way to say it even simpler than what I said. Next team.
There's a growing disconnect between people and nature, causing apathy over decreasing biodiversity. We've developed an application that enables anyone, anywhere, to learn from and appreciate the world around them, empowering a new generation of conservationists.
Okay, I actually think you presented it very well, and this is a matter of taste, but I think there is some verbosity in there that, you know, some judges might appreciate, but I think for a lot of them, they'll have to focus to really understand what it is. And you guys?
Right. Humans and wildlife have fatal collisions. We have a low-cost, real-time monitoring system to reduce this.
Nice, okay. In like air, sea, or sky, or water?
Terrestrial.
Terrestrial? Okay, perfect, yeah. I would just add that so people can like imagine exactly what's going on.
I can train elephants.
Right, perfect. You can mention specifically the animals, because wildlife is like broad. The more you can get people to visualize something, the more engaged they are, right? All right, 2-second team who's been arguing over here. Do you guys have something? Wow, infighting, all right.
It is currently impossible to predict earthquakes. Our app uses crowdsourced data about your pets to effectively predict you when natural disasters matter.
Okay, that's pretty simple and that's pretty good. So basically, earthquake monitoring right now is awful, but if we crowdsource it with our app, like it'll be really good and everybody will know when earthquakes happen. Yeah, so that sounds like a really stupid way to say it, but I think like, you know, it's easier for me to get because I'm stupid, right? Like So what I'm trying to say here is the ways I try to like change your ideas and simplify them a bit, that's not necessarily the right way. That might not be the way to go. I might have said something and you guys like to be polite and be like, oh yeah, that makes sense, but I might have completely mischaracterized your idea, right? What I'm trying to show you is that you guys have been so in this and so dedicated to your idea and thinking along these same paths that it's sometimes difficult to get out of your heads and think about just how simply you can explain this to somebody else and how they're going to react to what you're saying, like whether you're convincing them, whether they get it, whether they don't get it. And so the third lesson I have for you today is that the way to make a great pitch is to listen. Because in my case, when I was pitching to VCs, for the first few months the pitch was terrible and the VCs were laughing at us. And that was great, like listening to them, seeing what they wanted to see that we didn't have, seeing what we had that was maybe too much and their eyes were glazing over. And that's how we developed a perfect pitch. So in an ideal world, you guys would keep presenting to these judges day after day after day after day until you know exactly, like Groundhog Day, exactly what you need to say for these judges to, you know, really love your idea. That unfortunately isn't possible right now, but you can get a pretty good approximation by just pitching your project to the mentors here and to each other for the next hour and a half and really ask them for tough feedback. Like, just give them the 10-second pitch, and if they look bored, if they look like they're not getting it, that's feedback. If they ask a question that shows that they didn't get it, that's feedback. I'm really harping on this they didn't get it thing because in my experience, the number one thing I see in pitches is because, you know, the creators of the ideas are so thoroughly understanding of the idea, it's sometimes difficult for them to explain it in a comprehensible way, and you just don't realize that, right? Like, in some of our presentations, we completely didn't even say what our product is. We just jumped into the business because we assumed everybody knew what the product is. It sounds really stupid, but we actually did that in a couple presentations because we just hadn't said to enough people, like, here's our pitch, what do you think, what's your response? So the 3 lessons today are: 1, your pitches are always trying to convince somebody of something. Be sure you really know what you're trying to convince people of, not just show them your project. Be sure you know what you're trying to convince them of. Know who you're trying to convince. The better you know them, the better, right? Like, you know your parents really well, so it's probably a lot easier for you to convince your parents to give you food points money than it is for me to convince your parents to give you food points money. The second part is the power law, right? So really work on the 10-second pitch for most of your time, then work on the 30-second pitch, and then after that, spend a little bit of time working on longer pitches. And the final thing is just listen. Just keep telling your pitch to a lot of people. I have one example of that that always stands out in my mind. Last fall, we were preparing these Melissa and Doug pitches for this Duke project in entrepreneurship, and one of the entrepreneurs had honestly a really, really bad 4-minute pitch. And I told him, listen, man, this real pitch is in 24 hours. I want you to find 40 people in the next day, pitch to them, see how they react, listen to what they have to say, and just like kind of work that in. And the next day he delivered literally the best pitch of everybody there. Just because he'd been pitching to so many people, he'd been listening to them, and he figured out, you know, get out of your head. Don't think about what you want to say. Think about what people want to hear and about your project, right? Learn from what people want to hear. So with that, that's my advice on pitching. I hope it helped you guys a little bit. And I have another group coming in, but I'll be around until you guys are actually doing your project, until you guys are actually presenting, in case anybody has any questions for me. So thank you guys.